give it to you. There we go. And then post. Okay, you should see it on your end.
Got it.
Okay. We have a really good presentation coming up. Now, this is my struggle in my library program, like many of you, dealing with nonfiction titles, getting our kids to get really encouraged and excited about reading nonfiction. And Patricia Newman is going to give us some really great tips. So I'm going to let her just take it away. Thank you, Patricia.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So a little bit about how this seminar came about. I don't know if any of you know, but I'm not a librarian. I'm a nonfiction author. And two other nonfiction authors and I, Melissa Stewart and Kirsten Larson, got together and we thought, well, let's put together some programs for librarians to talk about how to use nonfiction to reorganize their libraries, to share nonfiction, to maybe help classroom teachers use it in the classrooms. So this seminar is a result of that, putting our heads together and some of Melissa Stewart's work with nonfiction. But before we get to the meat of the presentation, I thought I'd give you the Cliff's Notes version of my life. I never wrote as a kid. I was hounded by bullies in the 5th grade. So sharing myself on the page was the last thing I wanted to do. And I never even considered writing as an occupation until my mother-in-law recommended it. And I used to joke with her that I'm the only daughter-in-law ever that has ever listened to her mother-in-law. After college, I taught math, and I took some graduate classes in programming and was hired right out of class to be a programmer. I also worked at Cornell University in the West Coast Regional Office. I had 3 jobs. I taught to prospective students, I raised money for the university, and I did alumni relations work. I left work to be a mom, and I came back to work as an author. I've written more than 20 books, and these are some of my most recent titles. I've been lucky enough to receive several accolades, including a Cybert honor from the ALA. So let's get to nonfiction. What is it? We know, I know kids love it. I want to convince you that kids love it, but what's it? What is it first? Let's define it. And just by the very nature of the name, nonfiction, it sort of defines it by what it's not. So I'm going to stick with that sort of pattern. And it's not imagined scenes or invented dialogue. If any of you have read my friend Alexis O'Neill's The Kite That Bridged Two Nations, you'll know in the back matter that Alexis clearly states that this is historical fiction. It's not nonfiction because she had to make up the dialogue. There were no primary source notes with Holman Walsh's dialogue, Holman Walsh's words. Nonfiction is not made up characters or animals or inanimate objects that act as narrators. So for instance, Steph Wade's Mars is the character that speaks to us. And we all know that that can't happen, right? That's not to say that these books are in any way less than or not wonderful. They are wonderful, but sometimes you just don't have the research or the sources as a nonfiction author to turn your idea into nonfiction. Genuine nonfiction has real people, real events, real dialogue that can actually be documented from primary sources. It's carefully researched and fact-checked by our publishers, and it has verifiable sources in the back matter. According to the NCTE, they've just established a new position paper on position statement, I should say, on the role of nonfiction in the classroom. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but in part it says, quote, research shows that most young readers enjoy nonfiction and many prefer it. For some children, nonfiction is a gateway to literacy, as well as a portal to knowledge that sparks curiosity and fuels a sense of wonder. And if you're one of those people who loves digging into research, take a picture of this slide because all of the studies are cited for you. Here is a super interesting factoid from Publishers Weekly. Nonfiction accounts for 63% of adult book sales, where readers make their own choice. But look at this. Only 24% of children's book sales where gatekeepers stand between kids and books. That's interesting. Let's keep that in mind as we move along. There are several nonfiction awards specifically for nonfiction, and these awards make terrific shopping lists for your library. Another way to find great nonfiction is on LitLinks. It's a blog that I curate where we share the natural connection between STEM and language arts. And you might be saying right now, yeah, but all those are science books. Not true. A lot of them are about history, geography, culture, but there is a STEM connection, primarily because science, technology, engineering, math connect to virtually every aspect of our life. And it's just so remarkable to me how versatile nonfiction is across the curriculum and how applicable it is to our lives. Adults often assume that kids will find their way into reading through stories, but some kids prefer facts. Heather Simpson with Room to Read says children want their nonfiction books. Adults may be their barriers. Here's a poem called Facts by Adam C., who is in 4th grade, and I want to read it to you. Reading facts is like rain in my brain. Every fact is a drop of knowledge. Page by page, book by book, the puddle gets bigger. The bigger the puddle, the bigger the knowledge. Now read and grow your puddle. I know you can. Grow your puddle as big as you can. Now, if that's not inspiration, I don't know what is. So let's dive a little bit deeper. One way to help students engage with nonfiction is to talk about it in detail. Let's examine the writing style of various nonfiction. Luckily, there are only 2 writing styles. There's expository and there's narrative. Both rely on verifiable research. An expository writing style explains, describes, and informs using clear, accessible language. Books written with an expository style often include a unifying theme. Rather than a broad overview of a topic, there's like a laser focus to these books. So here's a unifying theme in some of these titles you see. The Beak Book, it's all about bird beaks. Bionic Beasts, Seashells. Usually you see the unifying theme in the title itself. Narrative titles, on the other hand, tell a story or convey an experience. A narrative style requires an arc with conflict or tension, just like you see in fiction narrative. Biographies are narrative just by definition. There's a chronology of somebody's life. Classified, 22 Cents, Nina, Sakamoto Swim Club, all biographies. But note, in most nonfiction for children, biographies are not cradle to grave. They are focused on a specific aspect of that person's life. In comparison, Fallout and Sea Otter Heroes are about an experience. Fallout is about the events leading up to the Cold War. Sea Otter Heroes is written like a mystery and shows how a scientific discovery about a trophic cascade was made. A trophic cascade is a food chain relationship that we never, ever knew about before. And those are the stories I gravitate to, the things we didn't know. As students learn more about identifying the writing style in a piece of nonfiction, you can discuss with them why the author might have chosen that style and whether or not it's the best choice for that book. And hopefully, by having discussions like this in the library, in the classroom, in a book club, that students will start to see that these are writing style choices that they can make as well. So I want to drill down into this writing style a little bit more. In Honeybee by Candace Fleming and Eric Roman, it's a great example of narrative nonfiction, and I'd like to read a page to you. Apis stands on soft honeycomb waiting. A forager bee approaches. Dusted with pollen and smelling of sunshine and fresh air, she's loaded with nectar. Food for the colony. Apis creeps toward her. Furry heads bump, and the forager brings up the nectar to her open mouth. Sticking out her straw-like tongue, Apis sips the nectar. She folds and unfolds, folds and unfolds, folds and unfolds her mouth until the nectar grows thicker, stickier. She stores the half-dried nectar in an empty cell. Over the next few days, it will ripen into honey. Now, what makes this particular book narrative? Well, we have a character. We have a main character whose life we are following. We have a scene that conveys an experience, how to make honey. We have a strong voice with sort of a wondrous, cozy tone to us. It makes us, draws us in, it makes us feel comfortable. Candace uses strong, precise verbs with alliteration and other literary devices, and she employs repetition, and she also uses line breaks to make the passage feel more lyrical. Now, on the other hand, let's look at Ick by Melissa Stewart. Ick is an expository writing style. And I want to read a page to you. Back at the hive, the field bee upchucks the nectar and a house bee slurps it up into her honey sac. Little by little, the house bee regurgitates the sugary stuff. As she rolls it around in her mouth, it mixes with her spit. The nectar warms up and thickens. After the house bee spreads the mixture along honeycomb cells inside the hive, her sisters fan their wings over the cells. Water evaporates, causing the liquid to thicken even more. After about 5 days, most honey is ready to eat. It's nutritious and delicious. So what makes this expository? It focuses on a process, a linear progression, making honey. Just like we read the passage we read in Honeybee, the two passages are focused on making honey, but this one focuses on the act of making honey, not so much what the characters are doing. It still has a strong voice. It's playful and conversational. Melissa uses words like upchucks and spit to relate to her audience. It has strong, precise verbs. She uses alliteration and other literary devices like rhyme. So these compositions are great fun for kids. If you can find 2 books on similar topics, have kids look at the writing style, see if they can identify what the author is using. And again, the hope is that they use it in their own writing. So here's another interesting, I'm a math teacher, right? I love graphs. A narrative writing style seems to be an overwhelming favorite for teachers and librarians in an unpublished study that Melissa Stewart did. But look what happens when researchers ask kids what they like to read. 42% of students prefer expository writing versus the 8% of adults. About the same percentage of adults and students prefer both expository and narrative writing, but only 25% of kids prefer narrative writing to the 56% of adults that prefer narrative writing. Again, along with that statistic about the sales of nonfiction books, this is something else to keep under our hats, right? Something else I want to talk about, the 5 kinds of nonfiction. Are you familiar with the 5 kinds of nonfiction that Marlene Correa and Melissa Stewart wrote about in their book? It was developed primarily to help educators and librarians use nonfiction with students. And it's a great classification system. It starts with the traditional books that we all know, smack dab in the middle, those all about books that provide a broad overview of a specific topic. And then on the far left end, we have active books, which are the how-to, the field guide, the cookbooks, the craft books. Browsable books are those little books those big, they're usually big books, but they have little factoids everywhere. You can read them in any order, and they're usually lavishly illustrated, and they're great for paired reading for kids. In expository literature, which unfortunately has the same name as the expository writing style, but we're talking about an expository literature book, everything changes. Here we have a focused topic. We have presented in a creative way with strong voice, rich, engaging language, and usually an innovative format. And a narrative book tells a story or conveys an experience, much like the narrative writing style. The example here that I have with the 5 book covers gives you an overview of one particular topic, ocean conservation, and the 5 different ways that authors have covered it in active, browsable, traditional, expository literature, and narrative books. The first 4 kinds of nonfiction use an expository writing style, so more like Ick by Melissa Stewart. Narrative books use a narrative writing style. That seems to make sense, right? And then if you're looking on a continuum of commercial to literary, the active and browsable tend to be more commercial, while the expository literature and narrative tend to be more literary. Okay, so research says that reading nonfiction aloud has a positive effect on, reading aloud in general, excuse me, has a positive effect on student engagement. But that same research shows that nonfiction read alouds are rare. Now, we've seen proof that kids love nonfiction, so we need to change that, right? A good target is to plan nonfiction read alouds about 40% of the time. Yesterday, I heard Rebecca Irwin speak about her one book, all school read program. And she showed us the several books that she'd been reading over the years she'd done the program. And my first thought was, gee, none of them are nonfiction. Why not? Just as you read fiction read alouds in the library, read expressively, be dramatic, be animated, show your eagerness for the material. In a book like Planet Ocean, which is a middle grade nonfiction book, maybe you just want to read parts of the book. Maybe you want to read a certain part and then watch a QR code. Maybe you want to do it differently. I have QR codes throughout that book. Maybe you want to do a QR code and then read. Maybe you want to use visuals and props as you read a book. Or maybe you want to use a document camera to really blow up those pages so kids can see some of the details. In April, I spoke at the Texas Library Association conference and conducted this demonstration with librarians about ocean acidification. Hopefully it's running, yes, to introduce my book, Planet Ocean. And this demo completely grabbed the librarians. They leapt up from their seats and they crowded around me to watch what I was doing. So what am I doing? I have cabbage juice that I steeped on my stove for an hour or so, and I added some water to it to dilute it. And we use cabbage juice because it's a great pH indicator. Now I'm squeezing a lemon into the cabbage juice. And like I said, it's a great pH indicator. Look at that dramatic change. It turns pink because of the acidity of lemons. If any of you have pools, you know about pH, right? So the next thing I'm doing, the middle is the control. We're not going to touch that. But the next thing I'm doing is I'm going to take a straw and blow into the last glass. And why am I doing that? Well, ocean acidification occurs because carbon dioxide from our atmosphere drops into the ocean. And when it combines with seawater, a chemical change happens. Okay, this is really hard science, but it's presented here so simply. And the more I blow into this jar through the straw, I'm adding carbon dioxide, and you'll see a slight color change. It won't turn pink like the lemon, but it's showing students that yes, there is a slight change happening to our ocean. And that's significant because marine animals can only tolerate a little tiny bit of fluctuation before things start to go haywire. So one librarian took this demo back home and introduced Planet Ocean with it to her students. So it's easy to look at the demo and then go to the book and read the specific part that applies to ocean acidification, to look at this graphic with the octopus and see the chemical change that's happening, because you've already engaged students with a physical makerspace sort of demo. The students can see what's happening to coral in this image here. On the left, we have a healthy coral reef, and on the right, we have a coral reef that's been damaged by ocean acidification. So these are all ways to really grab students and draw them into nonfiction. So let's study your library. When was the last time you took a long, hard look at the nonfiction section in your library? Is your nonfiction circulation low? Have you ever even counted it? Are kids not interested? Research says they are. Where are your nonfiction books located? In the back corner of your library? Spine out, maybe? Maybe let's rethink your library. Some of your peers have already done that. One K through 12 school librarian increased her nonfiction circulation 350% by aggressively weeding her K3 nonfiction and then grouping the rest by topic, like you see here in this picture. Here's another way. I write about the environment, but my books are not grouped together like a fiction author's would be. They're grouped under sea otters, they're grouped under zoos, they're grouped under ocean, they're grouped under, whatever the topic is by the Dewey Decimal System. Pull your nonfiction books by author so kids can develop favorite nonfiction authors like they develop favorite fiction authors. Another librarian added a popular nonfiction section to the front of her library, A high school librarian created looping slides that show the new nonfiction in her library, and she posted them on social media, which we all know high school kids view, right? When the students hang out in her library in the morning before the first bell, she plays bingo with them using nonfiction covers. And she has a regular Title Talk Tuesday where she incorporates nonfiction books. There are some really easy ways to share nonfiction with your students. Start a student book club or have them write book reviews that maybe you can add to your catalog or paste inside the front cover of the book. Maybe start a nonfiction book club where you choose different books from the 5 different kinds of nonfiction. At the beginning, perhaps you'd have to model conversations and choose books for students. But as the book club progressed, you could teach students how to use reviews or awards lists to choose their own books to read. And this one's my favorite, book tastings. It's modeled on the restaurant type of tasting where each restaurant comes under a tent and they offer you a sample from their menu. Pull out a whole bunch of nonfiction books from your library, organize them by category, and have kids browse. They can decide which kind of book they like to read. They can learn to identify the kinds of nonfiction. I did this with a group of first graders and fourth graders when I was a writer in residence. And after the activity, a first grader proudly came up to me clutching a book, and she said, "I chose expository nonfiction, Mrs. Newman." So take it from students like Asher and Kelsey and Ryan. Kids love nonfiction. I love Ryan's quote the best. "I like that nonfiction books really make you think about things for a while, and then sometimes your thinking changes." Miraculous, right? If only we could bottle this and use it with PEN America and the book bannings that we just heard about. And remember Adam C. Go out there and help young readers grow their puddle. But you guys, there's so much more to talk about. I have a nonfiction professional development workshop that's 3 hours. It's in person, it's fun, it's hands-on. And I'd love to come to your district and do it. But whether or not you're interested in that, please text NF to 1-833-530-5536. So you can stay informed of what's happening in the nonfiction world. I can share with you what other librarians are doing. I can share different books that are out, different awards that have come out. I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, actually, there are 2 questions in the chat from Tammy. She says, Patricia, will your slides be available?
Normally I don't make the slides available because I actually use these as parts of other presentations. But if we keep them within this group and it's private for this group, I can do that. Or if you want to email me, I can give you access.
Okay, that might be better if you email and get access that way.
Newmanbooks@live.com.
Okay. Second question. Are you able to give me a link to an audio only? I have to get into a car. Oh, okay. That's more for me.
That's for you. Okay.
Yeah, excuse me. Sorry about that. I'll take care of you, Melissa. I'll find a way to give you a link for audio. Okay. All right. But Patricia, thank you so much. I learned a lot by listening. And on a personal note, I am going to be doing dynamic shelving in my nonfiction this year. I did it as a pilot for fiction and it worked and my circulation went up. So I'm going to do it for nonfiction. So I'm probably going to circle back to you and let you know how things go. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me today.
Yes, it's so nice to meet you today. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye now. All right, so now we are heading into our next session. And our next session presenter is Lori Rusin. And Lori, there you are. Okay.
Good morning.